of all the municipalities in Western New York, I would say Buffalo is trying to be the most progressive in what it does.
Welcome to Ciminelli Chats, where we aim to share the latest news, real estate industry insights, and announcements. I'm your host, Grace Harner, and today we're taking a ride, literally and figuratively, into Buffalo's future as a more livable, walkable, and bikeable city. Is the city's infrastructure shaping the way we live, move, and grow? And are we ready for the changes ahead? Today I'm joined by Kevin Heffernan, Communications Director at GoBike, and Kyle Ciminelli, President of Ciminelli Real Estate. Together we'll explore how GoBike has been at the heart of transforming our city streets and talking about why Buffalo is gaining attention as a climate refuge. Kevin, thank you for joining us today. How is your bike ride in?
Smooth sailing. Thanks for having me.
Kyle, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise. Thanks, Grace.
So let's jump right in. Recently, Buffalo's mayor called our city a potential climate refuge due to our geography. We're above sea level and have plenty of space. But are we ready to handle a large influx of people, especially from a transportation perspective? What do you think, Kevin?
So as a big fan of our city, I'd love to think that we have an advantage that 500 feet above sea level, almost limitless fresh water. These should be attracting people here. And if things become so dire outside of our region that people need to migrate here, well, sure, we do have the space, but do we have the infrastructure? I think if you move here right now, you are sort of mandated that you need a car. Right. And it's one of the big reasons we pitch our region is low cost of housing. But then according to AAA, average cost of owning a car is $10,000 a year per car. So whatever you just saved on housing, you're throwing that in now too in order to access everything our city has to offer. And if we want to attract people from, let's say that, you're not just fleeing to Buffalo, but in the current moment, do I want to live there? Do I want to work there? Open up a business there? If you're coming from another city, say a Boston, a New York, Chicago, you've gotten used to certain amenities where you don't necessarily need a car and you can walk to get what you need. You can bike around. You can hop on Metro that connects to a lot of different things. And then you arrive here and it says, okay, well, make sure you rent or buy a place with a driveway because you're going to need a car. That can turn some people off. And I think we are very close as a flat city, as a city that at one time had the infrastructure to support over 500,000 people within its city limits, that we, could become a place where you can do it all without a car. And then you don't risk losing those people who might hesitate when they think, I'm not looking to drive. Gen Z studies say that in dramatically falling numbers, they don't want to drive. They want to just be able to access everything without having to own and maintain a car. So are we going to be the kind of city that can attract those people right now? Or are we going to be the kind of city that just says, hey, if there's climate disaster everywhere, then we're 500 feet above sea level, so come by us?
Very good points, Kevin. I think I agree with almost 100% there. I've been slightly concerned, and I know you and I have shared some of these concerns in the couple of years that I've known you, and I truly appreciate you taking the lead on this discussion. The community have really become a leader with it and so forth. But we have, we've got something that we're really proud of in terms of some of these younger tech companies and M&T and Odoo and ACV and 43 North, and we're so proud of this tech resurgence that we're seeing primarily housed downtown. For them to survive, they need the ability to recruit this younger generation that you mentioned from other cities that have reliable public transportation and have better infrastructure that can support bikes and other non-automobile ways of transportation. And we're just not there. And it doesn't seem that we have a plan to get there anytime in the near future either. So I am slightly concerned about that because, as you mentioned, we have people wanting to come to the city, and we have young people wanting to come work for these fast-growing companies that we luckily have here. But we really have to work as a community in terms of addressing what Gen Z needs and what Gen Z wants from a downtown environment. And a big piece of that is the ability to ride your bike safely to your office, have a place to store it, not have to worry about potholes, not have to worry about cars parked on curbs and so forth. And we're just not there right now. So I do think there's a lot of room for improvement in that. we need to start focusing on these areas if we're going to continue to move in the direction that we need to.
It's also a matter of economic resilience. You know, when it snows, we're supposed to be like, it's Buffalo, we don't care, we take care of that snow. In the last couple of years, it's been pretty difficult to manage. And at GoBike, we're constantly, you know, just as worried about pedestrians and people using wheelchairs as we are about bike lanes. And we are always pointing to Syracuse and Rochester saying, like, look, in Syracuse, they shovel all their sidewalks as a municipality so that kids can get to school on time. And in Rochester, they partnered with their transit authority, and they shovel the sidewalks near the busiest transit spots so that people can walk to it. And in Buffalo, every year, we talk about it for about 5 seconds, drop it. And so what does that mean when there is a big snowstorm? How many people are forced to stay at home because they don't own a car? 1 in 4 households in Buffalo doesn't own a car. How many others are trying to take the bus and the bus stop isn't plowed out, or they're climbing over a big old hill to get on the bus? And then everybody else is not realizing what those folks are going through when they're like, why is everybody walking in the street every time it snows? Well, because the street's the only part that's plowed. So, you know, it's just that hurts business when it snows and suddenly everybody's an hour and a half late, or some people couldn't even make it in that day. And we're supposed to be the town in our country that knows snow and knows how to deal with it. But if we're going to treat a fourth of our households like they don't exist every time it snows, then we can't be that economically resilient city.
Good point.
Yeah, I agree. And personally, for me, as someone who in college, I would always take the metro with my friends. Like, I was lucky enough to bike into work today with the bike lanes, and Ciminelli luckily has a bike storage below the building. But I can't say that I'm going to feel comfortable safely walking or biking anywhere in Buffalo, which is kind of why I was so passionate about having you on the show, because I really did turn to GoBike's mission. Like, you started out by fixing donated bikes and helping people in need, but the organization has evolved significantly since then. So can you share a little bit about that journey?
Sure. And thanks for letting us, because we've been on the news a lot this summer. And unfortunately, it's mostly been reactionary to children and adults being hit and killed more this summer than ever before. So a lot of folks may see us and be like, well, what do they actually do? About 16 years ago, we started just fixing donated bikes and turning them right back around to people who needed them. And then you'd see that person ride out of our shop on the wrong side of the road and blowing through a stop sign and be like, oh my God, they're going to get killed. Mm-hmm. So we then started to get some state grants to do education programs, teaching people, please ride on the right. You know, it's tough for some folks who don't trust drivers not to hit them. They want to see them coming, but you are exponentially safer riding on the right, along with how to ride safely, confidently, with agility, all these different things we do with kids. We go into NFTA to train their bus drivers. That's all part of state grants. And then we look around and say, okay, if everyone's got a bike in working condition, they're riding confidently, they're still getting hit and injured and killed, we've got to look at our infrastructure. And so I've been at GoBike for 3 years now and spent a lot of time in the social media comment section pointing fingers. You know, if drivers would only behave this way, and the drivers point right back, you know, if bikers would only behave this way. And the answer is you build out safer infrastructure that forces both to behave properly. When you narrow a road, when you build out an intersection, it automatically has drivers putting their phones down, putting both hands on the wheel and paying attention. And when you build a protected bike lane, you have those cyclists removed from those points of conflict that are aggravating drivers, or you build a trail or a greenway, and now everybody can get there. And what's better about those protected pieces of infrastructure is you also have kids that can feel confident riding. You can have older adults ride. We talk about, you know, our region and who wants to live here. We have a lot of older adults living in the suburbs, and as soon as they can't drive anymore, we sort of condemn them to isolation. But we work on trails in the suburbs too. We're not just an urbanist organization, and they kind of run through different areas of town where there's abandoned railroads. And say you get an older adult who can no longer drive but could make their way around on a 3-wheel bike or with a mobility device. Suddenly they're reconnected to their community. They're not homebound, just waiting on Meals on Wheels. So as much as we, you know, if you design it for kids and for older adults to be safe and make it accessible for them, you're making it safer for everyone, including drivers, because, you know, it's, as much as we lament people walking and biking getting hit, the majority of these crashes are car to car, and we don't want to see that either. So if we make it safe for all road users, that's a complete streets policy, That's what we push for first and foremost. Drivers benefit from that too. And that is something that Buffalo adopted over 10 years ago, a complete streets policy. And then in 2016, it adopted a bike master plan. At the time, we were promised 10 miles of bike lane per year. We're pretty far behind that, unfortunately. There's some financial reality to that. I think what we try to push at GoBike, what we both try to push with our Downtown 2030 group, is we need some urgency. We've had projects that are fully funded and they still take 10 years to complete. And that's an entire childhood. It's the last 10 years of mobility for an older adult. That, in the face of climate disaster, in the face of rising deaths dramatically since 2020, and we're in the 41-year high of pedestrian deaths in the US, it's unacceptable to take that long. So our pushes at GoBike, on top of all the other things we do, is really to get politicians to step in. We want them to go out for walks with us, go out for rides with us, and experience what it feels like. And we'll show them the good infrastructure and the bad. And we've had, anything from our board members to our board members' friends to politicians come along on these. They're like, now I get it. So we do leadership rides often. And I encourage anybody who's listening to reach out, and we'd love to do more so that you really experience what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's such an urgency for that, and safety's key. What are some practical steps our listeners can take to create safer streets?
Oh, sure. So again, I would say the very first thing you should do is consider the trips you take each week, one of them, whether that's to work or to the store or wherever, to a friend's. Could you walk or bike that? In Erie County, it's 30% of all car trips are 1 mile or less. And that's wild. There's a Buffalo News article today just talking about the level of pollution we have here and the bad mental health effects it's having on all of us. If we got people to take one trip per week outside of their car, outside of driving alone, we'd improve that so dramatically. And I think you can hear this and you can say that sounds right. That's a city I want. But once you go out there and experience it, and hopefully you don't experience a close call or something worse, but when you experience it and experience that joy, first and foremost, that felt really good. I had a lot of fun doing it. Then you're going to start wanting to do these other steps, which are, of course, call and email your elected officials. I think there's an assumption that elected officials are out there biking and walking. Not many of them are. There's an assumption that elected officials understand what a common sense policy looks like in your eyes. Not many of them do. I briefly worked for the state assembly, and every time our assembly member walked in the office, he said, who called, who emailed? And if there were 3, I mean, you tried to work on everything that came in, but if there were 3 on the same topic, that became top of the agenda. So people think like, yeah, it'll work itself out. You really got to understand the power you do have by just putting that email in. It becomes part of the public record, and the staff that works for these elected officials are eager to help. But, they're not reading through comment sections on social media. They're not seeing what's trending on social. They are still looking for your emails, your calls, or your attendance at council and board meetings and things like that.
So, Kevin, what's a good next step, or what are you waiting for from the city of Buffalo in terms of, man, I can't wait for them to start this project, or like what really has you excited about what can be done in the near future in Buffalo?
Yeah, one thing that's huge that we push for forever is the city now has a paint budget. So we would field these complaints all the time. And you remember what Main Street looked like above Goodell for years, had no paint at all. If you came here from outside of Buffalo, you'd be like, what is going on in the street? Which side should I even be on? The city has painted that. There's crosswalks down, there's bike lanes down. And, when someone's driving or drunk or texting or being reckless, paint can't save their life. But we used to fight for just those little sharrows, those little symbols that said bikers can be here too. We used to fight for those. Now we get the bike lanes in a lot more places while we're fighting for protected infrastructure. So I'd say a crowning achievement is Niagara Street, right? You want to build infrastructure that even the least confident rider could go out on and feel safe. And Niagara Street is what that is. So if we could get that onto Main Street, and there is going to be a project there, I'd say that's what I'm really excited about. But those will be elevated bike lanes, meaning they're up at the sidewalk level and they're on both sides of the street. So that'll be a different style. See how people like that. Kind of have to jump back into traffic to make a left. We'll see how that works out. But again, it's protected. It's going to be protected by an entire row of parking. you will be up there and protected and away from people's open doors. So that's going to invite more people to ride, to walk. It'll be a beautiful change for that section of Middle Main, they call it. From a business standpoint, again, there's so many vacancies all over that section of Main. And if you build out that infrastructure, look what happened in Niagara and everything that opened up there. We'll see that there. What's really exciting to me about that is we've got a bad history of segregation in this town. And even though we have a subway line that runs right under Main Street, feels really disconnected. It does feel like a wall. You know, after the shooting at 514-22, there was an effort to say, let's say East Buffalo, not East Side. We don't want to make it feel like it's divided. Well, until people are reconnected on Main Street and it feels easy to walk across, we are going to have that division, right? Who wants to walk across 6 high-speed lanes of traffic? You're just not crossing over. You're not biking over. So you mentioned, like, Grace, when you're biking, you don't necessarily want to bike everywhere. It starts with the main street in our town. It's the spine of the city. If that feels easier to get across, these new neighborhoods open up that you might bike to and go to and spend money at too. When we just put these things in these very small pockets, you know, having an Allentown and Elmwood Village be walkable is nice, but we can count those kind of neighborhoods on one hand. So what kind of infrastructure can we build to connect all those neighborhoods and create new ones? I think Fillmore Ave could be another Elmwood Village if we really invested in that infrastructure even further. Made it beautiful to walk and bike to from nearby neighborhoods. You'd see it happen there too. Ultimately, slower cars means better business. Look at the arterials we have throughout our east side that everyone can do 50 miles an hour on without any repercussions. How well are those businesses doing on Broadway? You know, on Genesee, on Sycamore, when everyone's flying by. But when you're on Elmwood and it's so dense that you're doing 20 miles an hour, those businesses are opening up and people are taking chances there.
I think, you know, our city was originally designed for the automobile, as you mentioned, and get, you know, when downtown was suffering, we thought about how to compete more with Amherst and Orchard Park than we did how to compete with other cities throughout the country. And with that, we basically just through high-speed ways, whether it's a 33 to 190 or other 50-mile-per-hour ways to get into the city quickly, because we wanted to make it easy for people to get into the burbs quick, or from the burbs to get into the city quickly. But we really never thought about the repercussions of that. And now here we're suffering from that because, as you mentioned, there's no reason to stop on the east side when you're going 50 miles an hour, and all those businesses are suffering.
Yeah.
There's, you know, obviously the corridors around the 190 are suffering because you literally just built a bridge over the top of them, so there's no reason for people to stop. And that's why we don't have this walkable community, because everyone has the ability to drive downtown within 20 minutes from wherever they are, park for, you know, $4 on the side of the road and leave. So why would anyone walk anywhere? Why would anyone get on the subway or get on their bike when it's that easy to take their automobile and be in downtown and then get out of downtown? But the sooner we treat downtown like a downtown and not like a suburb, the better we'll all be. And it's always mind-boggling to me to know that the city does have the money for these infrastructure improvements, but why is it taking so long? And you and I have never gotten the answers to that. And I know it's frustrating for both of us as we attend these, you know, monthly meetings with our groups and so forth, trying to improve the city. And we don't receive anything but excuses as to why this money that they have is not being spent on what has been proven to be successful in other comparable cities.
Yeah, we've definitely been banging that drum. Get it done faster, help people enjoy it now and see the economic development follow. Just to your point of those expressways, those are decisions that were made out of fear, right? We had America's best designed city before cars were even invented. We had the arterials, and then we had the park and parkway system put over it. And the crown jewel of that parkway system, Humboldt Parkway, we identified as perfect for a 6-lane highway to race people in from the eastern suburbs right to downtown. And I think that's a decision made out of fear. If everyone's going to live outside of the city, then please keep them working in the city at least. And now with remote work on the rise and things like that, those numbers are dropping. They barely justify the highway's existence in the first place. And then we look at a downtown like Buffalo and think, well, geez, how do we save this? And so we have to create these spaces that aren't just attractive to work in, but also to live in, that you can walk around the corner and be like, wow, there's an event going on here. Let me go check that out. And I walk another block and there's a small grocery store. I know that anybody who's listening that's traveled to other cities has experienced that. I remember visiting a friend pretty often in Chicago. lived in a tall apartment building, grocery store at the bottom. It's like, this is so cool. I've never even seen anything like this. You drive out to Wegmans, where I'm from. So those kind of lifestyle changes, I think, aren't first and foremost going to bring people in here. But I think if our population here is open to change, they're going to love it. They're really going to love it. We see that with the bike path work we do. The biggest haters of the Tonawanda rail trails were the people that lived right next to it. And now that it's built and biggest fans of Tonawanda rail trails, people who live right next to it. So, in terms of why is it taking so long with the city, there are certain things you have to do, and that is put out a lot of opportunity for community engagement. And you can't just assume everyone's going to see the social ad and fill out a survey. You have to hold an event, and you have to promote it for so long. The city could probably do a better job of even having its common council meetings in the evening where more people could go and talk about these things and engage and stay up to date with it. But those things slow it down. But then you've got your designs, and they've got to go off to city approval and then get passed department to department to department. We'll never know the total inner workings, right, of how many things are on their plate and all those things. But one project we're really excited about is the East Side Trails. As you know, the Skidjackwada Creek at the end of Forest Lawn Cemetery goes underground all the way to Cheektowaga. There's actually nothing built right on top of it, perfect for a trail. In some parts of the city that is there. It's this beautiful, grassy, windy spot, and it's got a single sidewalk that was probably built in the 70s, and it's just busted up. So we won a $10 million prize from the state. And bonus, it's all paid for by Volkswagen lying about their emission standards. So clean transportation prizes. 3 million of that is earmarked for the construction of these trails, and we just did get our feasibility study, with a stamp of approval from the city, so we can now go into design. So we started working on that 2 years ago, and that's where we're at. We did a feasibility study in those 2 years. It sat with City Hall for a few months, and now we can put an RFQ out for design. And then design happens, you put an RFQ out for construction. Construction happens when those construction firms are available. There's only one company that works in Western New York, Accent Striping, that'll even do the painting. And you usually see them so busy in August, September, October in Buffalo because they're working all across the state and they sort of get to Buffalo last. We were told that, the Skidjackwada Expressway redesign and rebuild will be on hold because all the construction workers available are on the stadium. And then they would do potentially the work on Kensington, and then they get over here. So there's a worker shortage too that plays a role in this. And then it's just the city shoring up financing and things like that too. But, a lot of those things are speculation as to what is happening in there. How can we move this forward? We'll follow up often and say, like, what other information can you need? What can we give you on data? Anything you need, we're here, ready. Just give us a call. And sometimes you just got to wait.
Well, I appreciate you being very polite about how the city's not spending their money and the lack of workers with the stadium. But, just to remind you, the stadium just started getting built about 18 months ago. So the lack of workers can't really talk about the prior 20 years where we had an abundance of labor. But, I appreciate you being very apolitical.
City's a partner of ours on many, many projects. And some of them have worked well. They'll let us do these pilot projects too. I mentioned that people are averse to change. What GoBike can do is put in a temporary piece where we'll drill down plastic and we'll put in new paint and have new traffic designs. If you said, hey, tomorrow we're going to dramatically change this street in front of you permanently, people will be really upset. When we tell them it's going to be a 3-month temporary thing and we'll ask your opinion before, during, and after, people are more open to it. So the city has partnered with us to sort of do that community engagement work before any permanent decisions are made. Summer 2022, we worked on Forest Ave, took away a lane of parking that our data showed wasn't needed. Only 40% of the parking on Forest Ave was there. Honestly, it pissed off a lot of people who were close by, but the people who were a block or two away were clamoring for it all along and loving it. So you get that front and back side of things, but we have data that shows traffic slowed down. There wasn't a crash during that time. More people walked, more people biked. Same thing for Parkside and Linden. A lot of vocal people in opposition. Whole lot more took the survey and said, I absolutely love this. But both final reports sit with the city and the final decision's out of our hand. They could do something like it or they could do nothing like it. So we're trying to do our part to open people up to these new designs and new experiences and get them out to feel around, You know, in our experience and in the data nationwide, if you get people walking and biking through a neighborhood that they didn't previously, they will spend more money at the businesses that are along that corridor. So we obviously promote this because it's fun, it's healthy, it's better for your mental and physical health. It reconnects our city, but it has backing in terms of the economy that proves that it's worth the money to spend too. So to your point, spend it now, because we need that economic development to happen in its fallout right away. We need it yesterday in order for our city to survive, as it's looking down the cliff of a financial problem.
No, absolutely, I agree. And it's you look at the amount of empty storefronts currently in downtown, and I think it reflects what you've talked about. And I think about what you said probably about 5 minutes ago about the growth on Niagara Street, and I can't imagine that's just coincidence that you've got a well-paved street with your brand new bike lane, and that is one of the few corridors over the last couple of years that has continued to grow from a retail and residential standpoint. And again, I just can't imagine that's coincidence.
Yeah, and it doesn't connect much in terms of bikes, right? Like if you're coming from Tonawanda, maybe the western side of Kenmore and Riverside and Black Rock, you can hop on that and get downtown, but you're not going to see just yet that Niagara Street cycle track just loaded with cyclists. So many people are like, why did we spend the money on this? I only see a few cyclists using it. Another reason that those businesses are doing well is because Niagara was also a 6-lane speedway, and now it's 2 lanes and a turn lane. And that suddenly becomes a lot more attractive for businesses to open up on too. Again, it's slower cars looking in windows and being like, I need to stop there. I'm going to pull over right now. Things they never used to see before when they were flying by at 50 miles an hour. So I think, you know, I mentioned we're not total urbanists, but I do live here in the city and I prefer it. I think if the city could stand up and say like, hey, we're in the city now, you're going to slow down. You're going to have respect for these people out walking and biking, and you're more likely to have a better experience here driving at that slower rate, seeing everything around you that we have to offer. You know, there's been times that Buffalo has definitely tried to pretend to be a suburb, and it really shouldn't. We've got all these amenities and advantages with these small, tight blocks and density that is an advantage over the suburbs. And folks in the suburbs, it's not a dig at them either. That's a lifestyle. But suburbs do well when there's a strong city core. When we are just another municipality competing with all of them, we're not doing well as a region. But a strong core at the city leads to better success for its surrounding suburbs.
Yeah, I mean, you look at downtown Williamsville right now and how that's benefited Amherst. I completely agree. And that's really, you know, the sole core and purpose of our downtown 2030 group that we're trying to get through to the rest of the city is that, you know, as you mentioned, we may be segregated physically by how the city was designed back in the day, but economically we're all in one. Mm-hmm. And if we can get downtown to really reach its full potential and become more walkable and bikeable, and really that environment that today's employee wants coming from a different city, then the tax revenue starts and the tax base starts increasing, and then that starts trickling out to the other parts of the city, east side, west side, south side. You know, municipalities have more money, and it all starts at the core.
If downtown's doing well, you're right. Like then there is money to invest in the east side, which desperately needs it too.
Absolutely.
In terms of walking and biking safety, it is totally disproportionate the number of people who get injured and killed on our east side because the roads are so big, and then investment to narrow them and do that kind of economic development through infrastructure hasn't happened there. So it needs it. But if you have a strong downtown, you can fund it as well. This money can't just come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, like every year when GoBike starts the year, I say like, this is the year that we're just going to sell how great this is for people who, you know, decide to ride metro, to carpool more often, to walk, to bike. And then every year we get a bit bogged down with the traffic violence. And again, I mentioned that this is one of the worst years any of us can remember. And in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, you know, we hear so often like, we're not Amsterdam, we're not going to be that way. In the 1970s, they looked an awful lot like Buffalo, cars everywhere. But so many children were getting killed that people finally said like, enough. And they protested and demanded infrastructure change. And the infrastructure, you know, welcomed so many more people to ride that over the decades, they became who they are now, which is sort of a ride and walk first, drive second. And you know, I don't need to see Buffalo and Western New York turn into the Netherlands, but we haven't yet seen that collective outrage over the deaths of so many children that we've experienced this summer. And that's something we're still trying to figure out. How many kids will it take for people to be like, I've seen enough of this. I want change now. And again, that change should come to every neighborhood in the city. When you try to make downtown a place that you want to walk through, to bike through, but then you come across Church Street and it's basically a highway running right through. Goodell, Elm, Oak, all of these just divide everything. Our offices are on Broadway, just a block away from Michigan. And every time we're coming downtown, we're kind of like, oh, I got to cross Elm and Oak. God, it just feels like such a wall, just like Main Street can feel like a wall. Church feels that way. So we're not going to see an increase in safety until more people get out, walk and bike, which is really hard, right? To say it's super dangerous, but you need to go do it in order to have this happen. And so when people do that, they'll be hooked in and they'll want to know what steps can I take next. It's ride more, ride with your friends, call your elected officials, email your elected officials, and demand urgency for this. Say that this is important to you. This is something you vote with in mind. Otherwise, squeaky wheels get the oil, and you got to be one.
Well, it's funny to say that, Kevin. We as a real estate community and as a political community, they'll also need to give the places to bike and walk to. There has to be reasons why people are going to walk somewhere or bike somewhere. And whether that's more entertainment downtown, coming from Buffalo Place or the waterfront, or whether that's more retail, vibrant retail. We have a lot of empty storefronts right now. So, in addition to the fact that we don't have the infrastructure currently and to make it safe, we really also don't have the reasons for people to want to walk and bike places. Everything's so spread out. And that's an issue that we have to really tackle from an economic development standpoint. But, I will say that even from a driving standpoint, if you work downtown and you own a car, you're getting your wheels realigned once a year. And that, I remember I went to the dealership recently, and they said, I have to spend $800. These are brands, a 1-year-old car. And they said, where do you work? I said, downtown. They said, yeah, you're gonna have to do that every year. Why is that? Yeah, it's not like that in other cities. I lived in New York for 20 years. Biking was the second most prevalent way I got around, in addition to the subway. I never once got into a biking accident in New York City. I came home for a wedding when I was living in New York in 2016. I got cut off by a van on Main Street, hit a pothole, and fractured both my elbows. That was once in Buffalo, as opposed to hundreds of times before that in New York City. Yeah. Think about the differences in density. So I feel you.
Yeah, and when we're talking about like, okay, well, the city can't afford that, right? Like to do this massive overhaul. Well, if you think a bit bigger down the road and you don't just keep kicking the can and try to patch these potholes and hope we can afford it again in 10 years, at some point, Niagara Street will have to be repaved. The Niagara Street cycle track will not. So when you take away that space from driving and make it more permanent space for people to walk and bike, you're actually going to be saving yourself a ton of money in the long run. So when people are like, why don't we fix the potholes? Well, because we're trying to maintain 6 or 8 lane roads that are just getting smashed to bits by these cars all the time. If you dedicate more space to that lighter traffic, it's going to last longer. So getting Buffalo and our region to think not 5 to 10 years at a time, but to think 20 to 30 years at a time, can make those things happen too. We can have a more sustainable budget that can afford to fix potholes, because now we've only got 70% of these roadways that we need to maintain in that way.
That's a good point.
So we're close, right? We're not hopeless in this city. We've known how to do it in the past. We're trying desperately to do it now. And I think we just need to tip the scales a little bit further into like, don't delay, get it done now, watch things flourish. If we're really, really concerned about how we're going to pay for all these city services, we have to put in the stuff that data proves works and think long-term.
Absolutely. You're right. We're not hopeless, and there is so much potential. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why you and I care so much to continue to put the time and effort into improving the city. If it was hopeless and we didn't really have the ingredients to make it better and really reach its full potential and, realize it's amazing architecture and so forth, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. We'd be focused on the suburbs or another city, but I see it as well as you see it. And we really just need to continue to voice our opinions, and there's a lot of new young executives and employees coming back here that want to see change, and I think, you know, we have the right voice and platform to make it.
Yeah. I think one thing the city could do is make make it very easy to get permits to close streets, things like that. I'm a big fan of running 5Ks. They usually never happen downtown.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 5K and a 5K post party downtown, things like that. And then you've got people experiencing those blocks, getting to know them a little bit better by running through them. Make it very easy to close down streets. I remember when Main and Mohawk was under construction, and they redid Mohawk, and they put in those pylons that could rise up so you could have it completely closed to cars. I've never seen them go up. You know, we've got to have more street festivals out here.
Couldn't agree more. You know, when I was in New York in the summertime, every single block once a week had a different street party, and it was just nonstop. And I know this isn't New York, but still, we've got people in this community that love food. We have great restaurants. We have good food trucks. We should literally be having an outdoor food festival every single week of the summertime, and not just, you know, what you see in front of Fountain Plaza, which M&T throws the farm, you know, the farm table stuff, but actual food trucks, you know, you get a couple's people playing the guitar and live music. I mean, that could happen easily in the summertime here every single week if we put forth the effort.
And that's the day that Odoo is interviewing an employee from out of town, and they're walking out of the building and being like, what does the city feel like?
Yep.
And you can't tell them when they're staying at a hotel downtown because they came in just for the interview, like, well, make sure you get out to these 5 neighborhoods and definitely see it all. They're like, well, I don't even know how to get around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course they could hop on a Ready bike and go see it all. But, you know, you want to see that right outside the door of the place you're interviewing at, and somebody yourself there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, making it easier, helping guide people through that process. And I should say, like, Danielle Rizzone in the permits office has given us a lot of help over the years too. But, you know, you look at something like the Elm Village Art Fest just happened, and that road wasn't closed, and a lot of people were upset about it. Something like that, city could be like, hey, you guys throwing that art festival, what do you need? Let us help you close this road and make it a total success. There's certainly, all of us could name city employees who are trying their hardest to make these things happen. I think, you know, let's have some transparency on what else the city, what are the city's obstacles? And then you build that better partnership with the nonprofits and the private enterprises to say, like, well, we can actually assist you with that. We can help you get right over that hurdle, and now we can speed all this up. But if we don't know, you know, why it takes as long as it takes, or everything that goes into the decisions the city's making, we can't help them come up with solutions. So, like you said, knowing that we've done this before, you think about the city and the way it was in 1901. We were kicking the whole country's ass, right? Like we were doing it. We had a huge harbor. We had these incredible designs and parks and parkways, programming like the Pan American Exposition. This was the city that people wanted to go to. Most millionaires per capita. And so all those bones are still here. When you look back on what the city was like back then, it was private and public, arm in arm through all of it. And so let's break down those barriers of how the city operates and what's holding it back. And let's come up with solutions together, and let's do it with urgency. And on our end with GoBike, the greatest thing that comes out of that is more lives are saved. We don't see as many dead kids and adults from these speeding cars and everything else. But as a Buffalonian and part of this community of Western New York, we just see this city that we can be very proud of once again. And that we want to get out of our house and off of our couch to go experience.
Right. And as a young person living in Buffalo, I was so fortunate to attend Skyride with my dad. He actually drove 3 hours just to attend it. And after our ride, he was like, we have to make this an annual thing. We've got to bring more people with us. And just even being there in that space was something eye-opening for us to want to make a change and advocate for everything GoBike or any other organizations are striving for. I mean, it can be difficult to bike whenever possible or to walk everywhere, but it's really the events that are motivating and inspiring. So I want to ask what events you have coming up that we can offer to our listeners.
We have Cranksgiving. As you know, there are plenty of people in need in our city, so we benefit Food Not Bombs and Provisions 139 on the west side by inviting hundreds of people to gather. This year, it is the first Saturday in November, second Saturday if it rains, at the Essex Street Art Center. and you will ride out in all directions and bring a backpack or a cargo bike and grocery shop it. And you'll choose like, okay, we'll do these 4 out of the 8 available. We'll hit these checkpoints and we'll be the first team back. And that part of it's a little fun, but people are also wearing costumes and, there's beer and pizza after. And we have a goal of 2,000 pounds of food that we'd like to raise on people's bikes. Last year, the goal was 1,200 and we got 1,700. So we think we can do 2,000 this time. Again, when you're given a map right at the starting line, so when you're allowed to open it and you strategize with your team real quick of where we're going to go, you're going to explore the city in new ways and ways that you hadn't before. You'll say like, well, GoBike's down on Broadway and Bray Miller's on the way. I'm going to go there and then we'll scoot back up this way. And then you experience that good infrastructure, that bad infrastructure. And suddenly, again, you're locked in. So why can't we fix that? So that's one big event we've got coming up. Otherwise, our Solstice Soiree is our big fundraiser at the end of the year. We throw camp coffee rides once a month. You meet at our office. We ride to a destination and make coffee like we're camping. It's just another way. We see a lot of people who wouldn't yet be confident in riding alone, but don't necessarily want to go to something like Slow Roll. They just want a bit of a better pace, but want to ride with a group. We do those. But for the most part, our programming is very much based on bike rodeos for kids, mobile repairs in neighborhoods that need the help fixing their bike and fixing a flat, down to fixing their brakes. We do it all for free. So that kind of programming that like removes excuses of like, well, I would ride, but I've been a flat for a month, or things like that. Or I would ride, but my kid really doesn't know how, and I don't really know how to teach them. We go out in the community and try and make those things happen is sort of our main bit of programming. And then the weekend after Taste of Buffalo next year will be Skyride 11, which we hope we'll have some fun new announcements for that.
Exciting. Love it.
About to take the training wheels off my 4-year-old's bike. I can just give them to you and I'm good.
You're going to donate the wheels? Yeah.
I'll donate the wheels if you need to ride the bike.
So the bike rodeo, we set it up in a parking lot. We put out little half tennis balls and these kids are learning agility. So yeah, come on down.
Oh, nice. It's great. To teach my son how to ride a bike.
There you go. Kyle, any final thoughts from you?
No, I just want to, take the time to thank Kevin. He's been a really good, positive, outward voice in the community. We need more young leaders like himself. And, we just know that we appreciate what you do and we'll always be here to support you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience about these things. Like I said, just get out and try it once in a while or once a week. And I hope you really have a lot of fun doing it and you want to chase that fun and keep going.
I second that.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Kevin.
That's it for today's episode of Ciminelli Chats. A big thank you to Kevin Heffernan from GoBike and Kyle Ciminelli for being part of this important discussion. If you want to stay updated on GoBike's work or attend one of their events, be sure to check out the links in our show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to Ciminelli Chats wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with more stories and insights into Buffalo's growth and future. Until next time, keep riding, walking, and advocating for a better Buffalo.